Hey, Gregory, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tom. Big fan of your blog and podcast.
Thanks so much, man. It's good to see you. It's good to meet you in person or over
Yeah,
Skype.
we've collaborated a bit, but it's good to have a live moving picture associated with your identity.
Yeah, totally, man. So if you guys haven't met Gregory yet, Gregory Diehl has lived and worked in over 50 countries now, and he continues to help others along the path of self-fulfillment through exploration. His books, Brand Identity Breakthrough and Travel as Transformation, are Amazon bestsellers, and his company, Identity Publications, helps authors grow their business with books, videos, and courses. So, Gregory, how did you get started as an author? Like, when did you write your first book?
That was last year, last May. So about 10 months ago is when I published Brand Identity Breakthrough. And that was actually a very unfortunate series of events where I had hired someone to help me prepare the content and publish it and then market it on Amazon. And after paying her a $5,000 deposit, I quickly realized she didn't actually know what she was doing, and she just ran away with my money, essentially after doing very little of what she promised me she was going to do. So then at that point, by the way, this is frighteningly common. I've since learned that the self-publishing industry is full of con artists and frauds, whether they are intentionally ripping people off or just careless. But at that point, I kind of had to make the decision, well, I still want to be an author, and I still feel like I have a lot of valuable things to say about branding and sales and marketing. So I can either take the small amount of work we've already done together and figure out how to do it on my own, or I could just forget the whole thing. And so I applied my entrepreneurial brain to sort of reverse engineer, how do people put a book together? How do they make it good? And then how do they, like any other product you might try to sell in the marketplace, I have a background in sales and education, so that was really useful for me. I just sort of viewed it as someone hired me to sell this product, what would I do with it? So I was creating the product at the same time that I was figuring out how to promote it.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I mean that's rough, right? Like getting ripped off, getting scammed. Similar thing happened to me. I spent $8,000 to get a blog done, right? It was like supposed to be like a blog and a funnel and like a sales page, and they were going to do like A/B testing for it. And this was like 8 years ago when like A/B testing was like really hard to do. Now we have all the cool software, right?
$80,000?
No, 8,000. Sorry, 8,000.
Okay, I was gonna
Right.
say.
But
All
still,
right.
basically, that's what happened. It's like they took my money, and 6 months later, that all I had to show for it was like a little simple WordPress website, which I could have built on my own, right? And so that it's a very similar thing. Is like that experience forced me. It was like, okay, either look, I can just be like, it's not working out for me. I tried and I failed, or I can say, hey, look, I obviously had no idea what I was doing, and that's why I overpaid, and that's why I made this big mistake. So I better go and double down and dive deep and learn as much as I possibly can so I can figure out how to actually make this work for me. Because, I saw all these other people making money online and writing blogs and being successful. Like, why couldn't I do that, right? And so that's just a good mindset lesson to realize for folks if, because like you said, this happened to so many authors out there. Probably thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of folks have gotten ripped off or scammed in some way, right? And so, I love your mindset on that of like, okay, I'm not going to let this stop me. I'm still going to make it happen. And I'm just going to have to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I find for the right kind of person, that negative reinforcement can actually be a powerful motivational tool where at that point it was more about actually proving her wrong and sort of standing up to the fraudsters of the world and saying, well, screw you, I did it anyway on my own, and I did it better than you could have done it, as well as just getting the book done for the sake of getting the book done.
Yeah, totally, man. So how did you go about that process? And like, once you got the book published, how did you get to bestseller status so quickly?
Well, I tried to kill as many birds with one stone as possible, and at this point I really wanted to minimize my monetary expenses since I'd already lost $5,000 and had almost nothing to show for it. And, a big problem with me, although I have a background in communication and various forms of business writing and marketing and sales, I have a very complex message. And if you've read any of my books, I have a very heavy way of writing, which doesn't always get a positive response. So I realized very quickly, I'm the kind of person you either love or you just don't get what I'm trying to say at all, which means that as an entrepreneur, I have to be very, very effective in my targeting, because I don't want people buying my book and reading it and leaving negative reviews saying, I don't get it, or he's too wordy, or whatever. So the first thing was employing dozens of beta readers, which I'm sure you're quite familiar with, just to get both from people who knew me already and knew my personality and knew what I was trying to communicate, as well as complete strangers that I just recruited from business forums wherever I could find anyone who likes to read. Fortunately, I didn't have to pay any of them. I just offered to credit them in the book, and as well as, explain my process of writing and publishing the book to them. So they got to learn a few useful things from that too. And so that really helped clarify the message, not just in terms of the actual content I was writing, but the order that things appeared in the book, so that things would be sequential and they would naturally guide people through. Because a finished book is more than just the ingredients that go into it. It's the way that they're arranged, ultimately, the way that they're presented. So that probably easily doubled or tripled the final quality of the book. And then at the same time that I was doing that, I was encouraging these people who were my early readers, some of whom really loved the book, to be prepared to leave reviews as soon as it launched, or pre-order copies. I did the pre-order strategy on Amazon. So for about a month before the actual launch, I had the Amazon page up there, pre-order for 99 cents. Tell your friends. I could start sending the Amazon page link out and podcasts and anyone who would find it interesting. So by the time launch day came around, I'd already reached number one in a competitive category, but still it was a pretty good accomplishment for coming from no experience publishing a book and to have really very little audience of my own. Like I don't have a huge blog or a huge following. Where
Your like audio and video and everything cut out. So pretty much didn't hear anything for the last minute.
Oh, sorry.
30 seconds. Just like half of it. So
okay.
I'm not sure if it's just the internet connection or what, but if you can like say it all again, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I ultimately ended up using the early beta readers, the ones who really liked the book, as my street team, right? As the people to go out and help spread the word, to leave reviews and pre-order the book, because I had it up for pre-order for about a month before it actually went on sale. And then I could send that link to the Amazon page out to bloggers and anyone else interested in it. And so because of all that really early marketing and because of the way Amazon's ranking algorithm works, a book that's on pre-order or has been very recently released, it's like graded on a curve, right? So every sale counts for a lot. So I was able to get up to number one in the public relations category even before it launched, while it was still on pre-order, which is not a super competitive category. But even getting that, someone who had no experience in writing or marketing a book and had zero following of my own, because I don't maintain a blog or have an email list of thousands of people, that was a pretty big accomplishment. And now almost a year later, the book is still selling quite well, usually ranking in the top 50,000 on Amazon. And now I charge a lot more money for it. So I mean, aside from the revenue, which is quite substantial, I've certainly well more than made back the $5,000 I lost in producing it. It's a great marketing tool because now I get to say I'm an author. I get to give away or sell copies of the book. We've redesigned the cover a couple times, so it's a lot more attractive than what I originally had. Red is a very powerful business image. We've seen measurable differences in the clicks just by now kind of optimizing the approach over the last year, and additionally with the other books I've written. And so all these little tricks, the main thing for me was just first getting a good book written, and then I figured I could take my time to optimize the actual sales and marketing process of it, make the Amazon page much more appealing, and just make sure it had a perpetual readership of people coming in over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good. Like that's a really good point. I think a lot of folks, they never think to do that. Like they never think, oh, I should change my book cover. I should change this. I should change the description and so forth. For a lot of reasons. But I think a lot of folks kind of take the approach from self-publishing. In my experiences, they just upload the files to Amazon and then they say, oh, that's it, I'm done. And when really it's kind of like the beginning.
Why isn't anyone reading it? Yeah. Or if they are reading it, why are they reading it? Who knows?
So how did you know, like when you uploaded a new cover, like did you like split test your covers? Like how do you decide if one cover is better than another?
Well, initially I just went with the cover that had been provided by the woman I paid $5,000 to, which was just some cheap, generic, probably done on Fiverr business brand identity breakthrough on a white background and like a pie chart that's supposed to represent business analytics or something. It's just, it wasn't terrible, but it really wasn't an effective cover. And so after a couple months that the book had been out and it had already been proven, okay, people find this to be a valuable book. I don't need to worry about anyone slamming it or no one buying it, no one liking it. Then I paid some graphic designers to produce, I think, about 6 different variations of new covers, each one with a different dominant color scheme. And then every week or so on Amazon, I would manually replace the cover with one of these new designs and watch without changing any other metrics, without putting any new ads up for it or any other major promotion, just to see all other things being equal, if I change it to a green cover or a yellow cover or a blue cover or a red cover, is there a noticeable difference in sales? And the red one greatly outperformed everything else. So that's the one we ended up going with.
Oh, it's really cool. I've never actually heard of anyone doing that in that much detail with that many covers. So that's a pretty cool way to split test your covers. Did you notice, like, because I know one of the things you do is, like, browsing the bestsellers on Amazon and, like, doing competitive research and market research and stuff like that. I mean, do you notice, like, a lot of business books have those kinds of red covers? Like, do you have any kind of insight into why that might be performing better for your market?
Well, we did definitely look at what's typically done in successful business books. And there were basically two common trends in this type of business book. Either if you've got someone who's already really famous, like Tony Robbins or Jay Abraham or something, who people would recognize, then you got a sort of a power pose of him on the cover, like, hey, Tony Robbins, improve your life. I'm not Tony Robbins. Nobody knows who I am. Nobody cares what I look like. And frankly, I look like I'm 19. So that probably wouldn't be the best image you want represented on a sales and marketing book, because no one would take me seriously. So the other option was essentially what we ended up going with, was very simple, a lot of just bright primary colors, big bold title, and we ended up going with one very simple graphic, which is a fingerprint, which represents, of course, uniqueness, brand identity, and that ended up actually being our publication company logo as well. If you can see, I don't know how well you can see this on the spine, we ended up using a very similar design just for identity publications, which is all about creating books that show off your unique identity or convey your unique message. So the fingerprint icon ended up sticking with us for more than just this one book, but that was the genesis of everything. A very simple graphic design, big bold title, big bright primary color.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I like how you keep it simple, right? It's like, I think a lot of folks, it's easy to overcomplicate things. I mean, I've seen some book covers, and you talk about $5,000. I mean, I've heard of folks spending $5,000 on a book cover design, and I've seen some of them like custom designed, and there's like flowers in the background and all kinds of images, and it's just like there's so much stuff on there. There's so much clutter. And when someone's shopping on their iPhone or their iPad, or even on on a website on Amazon.com, the 60 by 90 little pixel thumbnail of your book cover, you can't see all that stuff in the background. So I think the bold colors, the big font, easy to read, that's what's really important for most book covers, because that's what's going to actually allow your reader to connect and understand, what is the book title in the first place, and then get that feeling for, like, what is this book kind of about? And you don't need a lot of fluff to do that. Exactly.
Well, and I don't think that's universally true for every book. For a business book, I think that makes perfect sense, because people are just looking for instructional advice. They want something that gets straight to the point. The second book I ended up publishing was almost diametrically opposite of that. Instead of being hard-nosed, practical, educational advice, it was a book about travel and personal development, which was part personal memoir of stories of places I've been to, and part more just like, inspirational, find yourself, introspect into your own life. Who are you really? What do you really want? So that same approach wouldn't have been as appropriate. And we ended up doing something actually quite a bit more complicated with Travel as Transformation, which we used a few different themes: the colorful map background, the face of a man who looks like he's searching for something that was blended in a certain way that looked like he was changing. And in general, people say avoid brown and beige book covers because they don't really stand out as much. But I think with the elements of the colors and the face that we added, faces are a big attractant. We were designed to notice faces and click on them. We tested that one too I used 99 designs for that one. So I ended up paying about $400 to see 100 different designs. And of all of those, we narrowed it down to 10 or 5 that we liked the most, and that one by far both conveyed the message we were trying to convey and promote intrigue from, again, the right kind of person. Because with the way I write, it was all about targeting. It was who specifically is going to like this book, because 99% of people probably won't, but the 1% that do are going to really like it. So there's no one universal rule that applies to everything. A business book cover is going to be very different than a travel and personal development book cover or any of the other things we've done. We just released an aphrodisiac cookbook, which was not written by me, but by someone else who is qualified to write such a thing. And one of the biggest comments we get, I don't have a copy of it with me, so I can't show you, but if you look up Intimacy on the Plate on Amazon, which we released just before Valentine's Day, the cover is an oyster, which is known as an aphrodisiac, arranged on a plate as to resemble a woman's vagina. So it's not quite crude. It's not sexual and overly erotic, but it's suggestive in just such a way that you would do a double take when you see it and you'd say, okay, what is that about? I need to investigate this further. And it helps that it's also a pretty good book and it's gotten really good reviews. But the point is that one choice for the cover has made a huge impact just on people wanting to know more about it. But that wouldn't work on a travel or a business book.
Absolutely. I love that, like that creativity you bring to the cover designs, right? And also like the willingness to test, because I think a lot of folks, you know, they might be creative, right? And they might have really great ideas, but then they get so in love with their one idea, their one design, their one book cover, that they're not willing to test different things. And, you know, it's great to be creative, but if you get stuck with just the one idea, the one design, and you're not doing the testing, you're not really ever going to know if that's actually the best cover or the best strategy. You know, there's all kinds of things you can test, right? So where did you get that mindset from, that, you know, I'm going to try all these different things and see what works?
Well, I have a background in sales. So, you know, I've been trained to think in such a way that what is going to get someone's attention? What is going to incentivize them to make a buying decision? What are they interested in? What's going to promote their curiosity? Whereas I think most people who become authors as, I don't know, an act of passion, a labor of love, because they really want to get their story out or their ideas about this one concept, either fiction or nonfiction, don't have that entrepreneurial mindset. They're not looking at it from the outside in. They're just saying, I like this cover the best. This speaks to me the most. This flower really represents who I am. All right. And good salesmanship, any good product, whatever it is, book, anything else, is about finding that intersection where it is authentically representing what you're trying to represent, but where other people, the right kind of person, is interpreting it the way you want them to interpret it. But because most people are so close to whatever they do, they're not saying that just because you have all these associations with a certain kind of flower or a certain color or a certain whatever, doesn't mean that everyone else is going to associate it the same way. And you know, they never go through that laborious process of testing every little thing. They just say, well, I like it, so let's publish it and see what happens. And the beta reading process is essential for sort of weeding through all those things before they become potential issues after you've released it to the public.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So I think a lot of folks have heard about beta readers. You know, we actually had a couple episodes and we've talked about it before. But I think most folks in general, when they talk about beta readers, if they have beta readers, I don't feel like most of them really use it as a way to, like you've done, like you said, you know, reorganizing the book, adding new things in, changing the content, getting lots of feedback. So how do you go about that process? Like, how do you first of all, how did you find your beta readers? You know, and then how do you go about the process of getting them to give you the kind of feedback that's going to actually help you make the book better, not just like, high five, Gregory, you wrote a book, you're awesome.
Part of it is just, first of all, giving them permission to be negative, to be brutally honest with you. So some of my beta readers were people who already knew me or had worked with me and liked what I had to say, and others were intentionally complete strangers. And when I would show them, I would use things like Google Documents, where it's really easy for people to share comments or suggest changes to certain things, and there can be an ongoing public discussion. So if you see 10 people all making the same comment, I don't know what you're talking about in this paragraph, then hey, maybe it's a good sign that you need to clarify what you're talking about in that paragraph. And so I would tell them, I want you to read this not as though you're someone who knows me and is trying to support me as an author, but somebody who just took this book off the shelf, started reading it, give me your complete unfiltered thoughts as you go through it. If something confuses you in chapter 1 but then makes sense later in chapter 3, tell me as you're reading it in chapter 1 that you're confused by it, because then somebody might stop reading at that point if they're already confused in the first chapter. It doesn't matter if it makes sense later. I have to convince you to keep reading through the whole thing. So things really have to be presented in the right way. And in every book I've done, I've gotten some people who didn't like it. Not just, this isn't for me, kind of not liking it, but this is horrible. Who do you think you are? You need to go back to school and study writing for 10 years before you can publish this. People have said things like this to me on both of my books, certainly, and some of the other books that we've helped other people produce too. And when that happens, I then have to make a strategic choice. Either one, this is the wrong kind of person to be reading this, clearly, and nothing I could do would ever make this the right book for them. It's just a complete mismatch of target audience, which tells me an important thing about targeting the right people, to make sure those kinds of people aren't the ones who buy it, right? So I have to figure out why he interpreted it that way. 2, is there any way to fix it, right? What is it? Is it just one element that he didn't like, that maybe if we just changed the wording around, or if we moved that section early in the book, would it completely nullify his complaint? or is it fundamental to the message of the book that he's just not going to get it, right? So I have to either choose to listen to that and take action based on what he's telling me, or ignore it, or find some way to circumvent that potential obstacle. These are all very strategic choices when you're approaching this like a product, not just as a book you wrote because it's the book you wanted to write. All these things are in flux, and you have to be very open to feedback and very open to changing, what you thought the purpose of the book was. And if you're getting universally positive feedback about one element of the book, maybe say, okay, that's what this book is about, clearly, because everybody's saying this is their favorite thing about the book. Maybe I need to change the title to be about that thing. Maybe it's different than what I thought it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. So when someone gives you like that kind of negative feedback, do you like ask questions? Like, do you keep the conversation going? Because I know a lot of folks, like, you get a bad review or send a review copy out of your book, and someone says, "Oh, this is terrible. You're the worst person on earth," something like that, right? And you just kind of tend to like ignore it, shut down, delete it. Get that out of your mind. I don't want to think about that. But do you kind of like continue those conversations so you can get like more information on who that person is, why they felt that way, that kind of stuff?
Well, I don't get personally offended by anything ever. I just don't. But they have to be willing to give constructive feedback, and I've had both. I've had people who gave the negative feedback but didn't do so in a constructive way, just sort of in a talking down kind of way, like, you're too young to be writing a book about this. What do you think you know? And what useful information am I going to get from that person, right? So at that point, you just politely exit the conversation. But you learn something just from watching their reaction. And I've also gotten people who did the opposite, who told me every single reason why they hated it, their opinion on how it could be improved. And even if they were a bit aggressive in the way they presented it, and you could have easily been offended by it, saying, wow, am I really qualified to be an author? Should I really be reading this book? Instead, I can, from a neutral distance, and it's helpful too if I do it on behalf of other writers, so they're not the ones that have to be having these conversations if they would take offense to someone calling their work bad. Instead, I can be the impartial third party who comes in and says, okay, so here's some of the feedback I got from the readers. Most people love this, but this one guy was really insistent that, this chapter just isn't working for him whatsoever. And here's why he said it didn't work. What do you think is the best way we can improve that? Especially if it's a subject I don't know anything about. Like, we just did one on a guide for taxes for U.S. expats. I'm not qualified to write that book, right? I understood most of it because I am a U.S. expat, but when I would get critical feedback saying, what you have in chapter 5 is wrong, then I have to go to the guy who actually wrote the book and say, well, here's where people are getting confused about chapter 5. In your expertise, what's the best way to clear this up without sacrificing the actual message of the book? So there's a lot of roles that have to be played to do this effectively, but we've gotten pretty good at it.
That's great. Well, I love your attitude about the whole thing, right? It's like being open to feedback, not taking things personally, testing out lots of different things. It sounds like simple stuff, and it sounds like, especially if you've been through business school, it's kind of like obvious stuff for a lot of folks. But, my experience has been that like those few fundamental things of not taking things personally, not having your ego in the way, being open to new ideas, being creative, and being willing to test different things to see what actually works in the real world. You just do those handful of things, just 5 little things like that, it can make a huge difference in your results.
Yeah, you have to absolutely view it as an entrepreneur creating a product, right? And it's very hard for some people to take up on both those roles, where they are both the artist and the entrepreneur. But if you can't do that, then you need to hire someone, perhaps me, or perhaps anyone else who can give you a more neutral perspective on whether or not this is working the way you intended it to. And no matter what you produce, not everyone is going to like it. So your question then becomes, do you change it so that more people will like it, or do you just learn how to avoid the people who won't like it?
Absolutely, man. That's great advice. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us today, Gregory. I really appreciate it, man. Where can folks find out more about you and the work that you're doing?
Identity Publications is the publication company that my partner Anastasia and I have started since doing several successful launches. We tend to focus on messages of really deep substance, really complex value that need a lot of work to be presented effectively as a book. So you can check out our website at identitypublications.com. You can email me, contact@identitypublications.com, or just feel free to check out any of the books we've done on Amazon. They're very colorful and beautiful cover designs, mostly because of my partner who does the design work. But yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gregory. Appreciate it.
Bye.